Hello and welcome to another session with me, Dr. Jen. Today is supposed to be our Thursday live with Dr. Jen, but we are currently in the rainy season here in Cameroon and the network is quite challenging to navigate. But thank God there are always alternatives. So this is a playback video, still on the topic that was announced, the truth about sending kids away on holidays. Now, this is a very pertinent topic, and I'm looking forward to having you share your feedback in the comments. Let me know at different points as you listen to this session what your thoughts are, what your experience is, so that we can make it as engaging as possible, even though this is not a live session. Great. So, some of my most fond memories of my childhood actually are tied to the few experiences that I got to have as a child going away on holidays, right? Growing up, my dad was someone who was not in support of having us go away on holidays. I remember as a child, I only began to go away on holidays mostly in my teen years. Before then, memories I have of us being away at a relative's place during the holidays, I was actually accompanied with my mom, accompanied by my mom, my kid sister and myself. We would only go away on holidays when our mom was accompanying us. Now, at the time, of course, all of this didn't make sense to me. But as an adult, especially as a parenting coach, I see a lot of wisdom in the things my dad did, the decisions he took, and how firmly he stood on those decisions, even when they raised a lot of dust in the family. I'm sure for most of us Africans, you can agree with that. The whole sending kids away on holidays is more like a tradition for many families. It's almost culture. It's almost like a law that during the holidays, kids have to either gather in grandma's home or gather at an auntie's or uncle's place. So it's almost tradition for so many families to have children go away on holidays. And some of the reasons behind this particular decision is usually tied to the fact that, it was a part of a big part of the fond memories that many parents have of their childhood. And coupled to that, it's tradition, like I mentioned earlier. So just based on these two, many parents just, hop and send the kids away without thinking so much because of the influence or the pressure that they're experiencing from the fact that it's tradition or because of the fact that they enjoyed their time away on holidays. Now, there is a lot to consider that should be able to influence whether or not you are sending your kids away on holidays. Basing that decision only on the fact that you have pleasant childhood memories or the fact that it's tradition is too superficial. If you're just joining in here, then you're welcome. I am Dr. Jen Diboti. I'm a parenting coach, the founder of the Purposeful Parents Academy and Parenting with Dr. Jen. So every Thursday we meet here on YouTube Live at 3 p.m., which we were not able to do today because of the network. But if you tune in here every Thursday, 3 p.m., you would be able to catch me sharing on an insightful topic on purposeful parenting. So today we're talking about the truth about sending kids away on holidays. And I would like to hear from you in the comments. Do you have any experience going away on holidays as a child? Are some of your fond memories attached to this experience, or did you have, maybe traumatic memories? There are some people, I've actually heard stories of people who went through different kinds of trauma tied to going away on holidays. And of course, this influences whether or not they are sending their kids away on holidays as well. So, depending on where you're coming from, depending on what your childhood experience was all about, it will largely influence whether or not you are choosing to send your kids away. But I would like us to look a little bit deeper. I like us to look a lot. What am I saying a little bit? I like us to look a lot deeper at the key issues that we ought to consider before arriving at the decision whether or not to send kids away on holidays. Because hey, there are benefits, right? Sending kids away on holidays has tremendous benefits as well, but it also has risks. And making any sound decision will always entail that you weigh the risk, but you also consider the benefits so that you are making a decision not just based on your own experience, not just based on your own preferences or tradition or pressure from family, but basing it on the utmost needs of your child and of your parenting journey in that season of your parenting. So if you're joining in, you're just welcome. I'd like to hear from you in the comments. Where are you tuning in from? Is this your first time tuning into any one of our sessions here, or are you a usual? Let me hear from you in the comments. So, looking back, like I said earlier, I now see a lot of wisdom in the decisions my father made. Of course, at the moment, at the time when he made those decisions, we protested. And it raised a lot of dust in the family because every other person, was sending their kids to different places within the family for holidays. So, why were we so special? What was it about us that my dad didn't want to allow us to come? Some family members really took offense at the fact that my dad would not allow us come to spend some time with them. All right. And of course we were angry. So he was like a lone soldier on this decision, but he stood his ground, and I am so grateful that he did. Because not only is it an example, something for me to learn from today, but looking back now, I see so much wisdom in his decision, especially the part where before we were teens, my mom had to accompany us if we had to go visit her family, or any family member we had to go to for holidays, right? So the few memories I have of us traveling to visit family, we were always in the company of our mom. Today we see so many people. I've actually seen parents or kids. I've actually met kids at the park who were boarded onto a bus by their parents, onboarded, by their parents into a bus traveling to one region or another to be picked up by family. I've seen parents send kids as young as 2 years old, to some other relative's place for holidays. What are the limits when it comes to sending kids away on holidays? What are the risks? What are the things that you should be considering? But before we go deep into that, I'd like us to talk about the biggest mistakes that parents make when it comes to the whole subject of sending kids away on holidays, and why it is that many parents are vulnerable to making these very mistakes. Remember, I mentioned earlier that for so many of us, the long holidays, come with so many fond memories. They remind us of some of the good times we had traveling to visit maybe an auntie and uncle, your grandparents, going to the village, exploring adventure, especially for those who lived in big cities. Traveling to the village sometimes was really fun because you get to go on adventurous trips, explore different places, explore different things. So yes, for many parents, it carries a lot of fond memories. Okay. And for some, there is pressure. Now, in many families, to dare say that you will not send your kids to another relative's place for holidays will raise a lot of dust. These are the realities that we are facing, even for parents today. I've actually had conversations with parents who are in the middle of a dilemma on whether or not to send their kids, anticipating the amount of dust it will raise, even though they have identified pertinent reasons why they should decide against it. All right. Now, you cannot be a purposeful parent and be a people pleaser at the same time, because the purposeful parent follows their why instead of the crowd. You follow your why. If the why is in the direction of the crowd, then so be it. But many at times, your why will take you in a direction that is most often in the opposite direction from the one in which the crowd is taking. So you have to be ready, for for dust to rise, right? You have to be ready for your decisions to unsettle a few people every now and then. That's why you need to have a solid why. That's why you need to understand what those pertinent reasons are that have influenced your decision. That's what helps you stay grounded, even in the midst of pressure. So even though you had a positive a childhood experience going on holidays, it does not automatically mean that your children will experience the same thing. One thing that we forget that causes so many parents to make grave mistakes with parenting today is we forget that the world in which we are raising our children is not the same one in which we grew up. That world no longer exists. So much has changed. All right. Times have changed. Now, if there is one singular reason why you should not make this decision just based on the fact that it worked for you when you were a child, is based on the fact that times have changed. That world you knew no longer exists. Many of us, I've heard parents bring arguments like, oh, but, they're going to meet my sister, they're going to meet my brother, this is my family, they'll take care of my kids. That's true. Again, most of these things are based on assumption. For example, you are basing it off the fact that you're sending your child away to meet with your maybe your blood sister, your own brother, but you don't, you know, take into consideration the fact that that person, that sibling of yours, also works full time. You haven't taken into consideration the fact that that sibling of yours might not be living alone, might have other people within the household that you are not familiar with, that you do not know. So there are just so many other variables that you have to consider before you make this decision. So again, the world has changed. Now, what does this imply? Now, when we say the world is no longer what we used to know it, it means that there are so many different influences on the behavior of children today. And one of those prime influencers of kids' kids' behaviors today is the media, is the screen. And kids have direct access to these things today more than ever before. Now, the implication of that is the fact that the behavior of children today is largely influenced by what they are consuming on the media. So if you have a child who has uncontrolled access to the screen, there is also a very great chance that such a child might have come into contact with inappropriate content, with content that might sexualize their behavior, with content that might, cause them to be more violent, with content that might cause them to be able to think, in a way that is far beyond their level, right? Sometimes you hear a child use a swear word that is, you're like, who is this using this kind of word? So the influence of the media is pretty big when it comes to how children of today behave. So we can't ignore that. So digital exposure for kids today has increased the risk of the inappropriate content that some of them are consuming, unsafe online interactions, influences that did not exist in previous generations. We never had these things in our time. We never had these issues in our time. Yes, it's true that sexual abuse is an old problem. It's not something that just started today. Even in the Bible, we have sexual abuse. All right. But we see the rising trends, the growing trends as time goes on. And the more digitalized the world is, I'm sure you've noticed that the more we have more cases of sexual abuse coming up. So it's safe to say that the amount of kids being sexually abused is on the rise. And we cannot separate the influence of the media from this particular occurrence. We cannot say that there's no connection between the fact that there's greater access to media and the fact that many more kids are being abused. And this is the shocking part for many, right? This is not a month of sex education. That will be next month. But it's very important that we realize that when you look at the child predators, the people who are abusing children, most times we just think in our heads that it has to be an adult. We don't realize that the greatest number of sexual abuse cases is child on child, not adult on child. Adult on child is not as frequent as child on child. So that's a variant or a variable that many parents are overlooking. You're thinking that just because your child is going to a place or they're going to meet their cousins, and you don't think of the fact that if in that home there is not enough control over how media devices are used, there is the possibility that those children might have come across inappropriate content that will influence their behavior. That will influence their behavior. So again, the rates of sexual abuse, the rates of bullying, the rates of exposure to harmful influences is on the rise. And when we talk about harmful influences, it might just be an adult influencer that a child is following, that is giving them adult ideas, influencing how they relate with people, influencing how they relate with their peers. So some kids, go onto these spaces and they take up ideas in ways that it ends up being harmful for them. For example, a child who spends a lot of time consuming content that kind of suggests that having a relationship is a must, or having a boyfriend girlfriend relationship is a must, or having a how do they call it, a romantic relationship with the opposite sex is a must, would have some kind of pressure to indulge. All right. So another thing you must be concerned about, or that leads many parents into making certain mistakes in this area, is the fact that they don't consider who is really watching your child? So you're sending your child away to a relative's place, you're sending your child away to a family member's home, someone that you know fondly growing up. All right. And because of your family bond, because of the memories you have with this person, you just assume that this person will be a safe environment for your child. You don't know much about their parenting style. You don't know much about, how their home runs. And because I know of cases where parents have sent their kids to a relative's place that they haven't seen in a while. You haven't seen this person in a long while, but then you suddenly send over your kids for holidays because it's the logical thing to do. It's what we do in our family. It's how we keep the bond strong. While that might be true, there is a lot that you are not aware of. So who is really watching your child? Is it the person that you know and remember fondly? Or does this person that you're sending your child to have other adults that will step in to provide care for your child while they step out to do other things or to go to work even? Because, like I said earlier, many times we're sending our kids to some of these people who also work full time. And you realize that the time your child is actually having to spend with the person you had in mind when you were sending them away will not even be as available as you probably were thinking, right? They have to work, they have other social functions, they have other things to do outside of the house. So while they are away, you also have to consider who will be watching my child. Many parents have never thought to ask this. Let me hear from you in the comments, right? If you're in the habit of, or you've had the culture of sending your kids away on holidays, have you ever thought of asking the question, who will be watching the kids while you're not there? Many people don't think about that. Many just send the child, oh yes, Auntie D's, the kids are coming. Okay, great. All right, once the kids are picked up, the kids are here. I'm so happy to see them. The next morning, the person is off to work. Who stays back with the children? So these are some gaps that you need to be able to fill up before you make that decision, right? So who is responsible for your child's safety when the main caregiver is unavailable? Is it going to be a neighbor? I know of cases where kids came on holidays, and because of the culture of that home, they packed them and sent to the neighbor's house while the caregiver they were sending the kids to had to step out to go take care of some business. And the parents were not aware that this is where the child would be, because they just know that because they are sending it, they are sending their kids to someone they know and are familiar with, that person, will be responsible for the child. So, how there are differences in parental values from one home to to the next. In some homes, for example, where I live in Douala, there are homes where the kids are by themselves for the most part of the week. During the holidays, they are by themselves from morning to evening when their parents come back. During school time, thankfully, they spend a large chunk of their day at school and then only spend a couple of hours before their parents come back. But during the holidays, you really see the gap. You really see that these kids are by themselves. From the time their parents leave around 8 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, they only come back at 6 in the evening. So during that time, they are by themselves. So during that time, they are by themselves. I also know of cases where while the parents are out, kids are on holidays, they simply just send them over to the neighbor's house and send the holiday makers as well. Because I can't be sending my kids over for someone to watch them and then you stay back. No, you all are going to go to the neighbor's house so that you can be looked after while I am at work. So what level of supervision will your child realistically receive? Now, as a medical doctor who has had the privilege of, receiving emergency cases, particularly during the holidays, the highest number of children that are rushed, on an emergency basis to the hospital, it usually peaks during the holiday period, whether it's injuries, falls from heights, or injuries while playing, or different things. And for most of the cases that we've encountered, it happened during the time when the parents were away. Usually, these kids are rushed in by the nanny or by a caregiver while the parent is at work, and something goes wrong. And we've received holiday makers. And I can remember one of the cases I received vividly where the child lost consciousness. I think the child fell and hit the head or something and lost consciousness. So when the caregiver who was called from work rushed the child to the hospital, she was in total panic. She kept on telling me, "This is not even my child. This is not even my child. I pray the child will be okay." And yes, accidents do happen. But again, remember I've said that these statistics, these occurrences are on the rise. They are on the rise. So if I have 3 kids in my home and I have a nanny and I'm receiving 3 other holiday makers. That makes a total of six. And I work and I still leave these six kids with one nanny. My nanny that I had, the one person that helped me with my kids while I work full time, is the same person that is going to be available when three other maybe small children are coming in to join. So these are things that parents don't really sit down to consider. So I'm sending my kids to my sister's place, right, for the holidays. And I have three kids. My sister has three kids. Maybe her oldest child is 8, the youngest is probably 2, and I have maybe 6, 4, and maybe, I don't know, 10-year-old. And I add my 3 to her 3, which makes 6, forgetting that my sister too has to work, right? So suddenly you have a nanny with 6 children who knows 3 and doesn't know 3. So there are some gaps that you need to be able to consider when you're making this decision. All right. Don't forget that supervision, particularly when you're dealing with small children, is key. That's why there is a certain age that the whole idea of sending kids away on holiday should not even be considered. It shouldn't be considered for safety reasons in particular. It shouldn't be considered, except this child will be accompanied by an adult familiar to them, preferably the parent, and which might mean you're going to have to shorten the stay. But again, there are some things that you shouldn't compromise on because it leaves room for regret, possible regret. There are some things that we shouldn't be compromising on. Don't be carried away by the pressure of tradition. Don't be carried away by the fondness of your childhood memories and base your decisions to send your kids away just off of those two. The likelihood for you to make mistakes is really high. All right. And it could be costly. One of the things that happens is that by the end of the holidays, I usually get lots and lots and lots of parents trying to reach out to me to book for private sessions. And during these sessions, usually is damage control. Oh, my kids went here, this is what happened. Oh, I sent my kids here, this is what happened. And then there's damage control. What should I do? I discovered my child watched pornography. I discovered my child was touched inappropriately. I discovered my child, so many of these stories. Usually by the end of holidays, I get so many of such parents reaching out. That's why when I teach on these things, I teach on it very passionately because it's better to prevent than to treat. Having to do damage control for a child that, has gone through the trauma of being abused while they were away on holidays at the family member's place is much harder than making those tough decisions that could have prevented all of that in the first place. So another reason why parents make a lot of mistakes in this area is because they forget that different parenting styles and different household rules apply in other people's homes. Even if it's your sibling, right? Many times, now, for example, I've had several of the parents I've gotten to work with reach out to me to tell me about how they send their kids away on holidays. As purposeful parents, they are obviously taught so many things. They have so much going on. They send the kids away. The kids come back and they discover they have to start certain things from scratch. They have to start dealing with bad habits that were not there, that have been picked up while we on holidays. I actually had a parent tell me, next year, is this never going to happen again? When I first of all heard you teach on this, I didn't take it too seriously. I thought maybe, because it's but now I discover I have a lot more work to do. Why? Because you're sending kids that are still very impressionable. All right, you're sending kids that are still in their foundational years. They are still in those tender years, those years when they easily pick up stuff, right? Where they are like real sponges, just absorbing whatever it is that they are coming across. So you have to have some limits. You have to have certain things, certain pertinent stuff that you're considering before you arrive at this decision to avoid regret, to avoid, things that would cause pain and things that will be very, very costly for you on your journey. So not all families share the same discipline methods. That's why you see some of the feedback we get is the fact that, I had succeeded to teach this to my child, but my child went there, and they don't do chores in that home. My child has come back now. There's a resistance, to chores, or my child has gone over there. My child didn't use this word, but now my child has come back, and this is what I'm having to deal with. So these are all realities, all right? And kids will encounter different behavioral expectations in different households. That's why one of the things you want to try to do is to inquire about the values, how certain behaviors are addressed and all of those things. But we don't usually think about these things. Why? Because we are either just too worried of the pressure from the tradition that exists, or we are just looking at just the fun that the kids are going to have, just the pleasant experience that they're going to have, that we overlook the other important things. So there are homes where anything goes. All right. And actually, some family members, when they are having your kids over at their place, they're usually more indulgent. They're usually more permissive. They are some people will be afraid to be strict or be firm with kids that are not theirs. Maybe you've just gotten your nieces, your nephews into your home, and you don't really want to apply, the same rules that you apply on your own kids. Maybe you become more permissive because you're just trying to have them enjoy. So it's coming from a place of good intentions. But again, good intentions do not always mean a good outcome. All right. Now, another thing that leads to mistakes is the emotional and psychological impact of being away from home. I had a case of a parent who shared with me about how, she has been having some issues with her, I think 3 year old. Yeah, about 3 year old, and was considering sending this child, you know, to another country. All right, leave the child there and then come back so that the child can stay there for 2 3 months. And I think the reason was something about screens or outdoor play or something like that. And I was like, wow, did you consider the fact that this child's still very young? We don't realize how important attachment is, especially in those very early years. Setting a child, disrupting that attachment in that way can actually create long-term problems for you. But usually we are so focused on, we're just so blindsided by the pressure of, from family, that we don't really think about how certain decisions will impact the child in question. If you ask the parent whose child was abused because they were afraid to ask questions, or because they were just too eager to send the kids away on holidays, they'll tell you, I'm never going to send my kids anywhere again. I've actually had a parent whose children came, four kids, four girls, came very, very close to being abused. All right. Thankfully, it didn't go too far, but the experience was so frightful for her that she told me, never again. Never again. And since then, she has never sent her kids away. No matter what I've tried to tell her, tried to get her, the kids need to meet their family. You can't raise your kids in isolation. You need to be able to build family bonds. You can go with them. It's just about, when you fail to allow knowledge, all right, or to get the knowledge that is required or relevant to influence your decisions, you'll find yourself being led by your fears, either of what has already happened or by your traumatic experiences. And they can also be misleading, because just the fact that, okay, for example, there are parents who have had abusive experiences from going away on holidays, and based on that, they are shut it down, right? They're not even willing to consider the fact that their kids can even go to meet with other family members and stuff like that. So I know parents who, before taking any one of my courses, were raising their kids in isolation because of the trauma that they experienced, either at the hands of one auntie or one uncle, or even being abused sexually. And because of that, those fears, right, that traumatic experience begins to shape their parenting decisions, even to the detriment of their child's development. There are so many parents who are keeping their kids locked up, all right? Little social interactions, because of their traumatic experiences, not because that's what's best for the child. So you see that you can't base your parenting decisions on assumptions. You can't base it on your fears either. It has to be based on sound knowledge, nothing else. So even your fears, yes, they are valid, right? Your experiences are valid, but until you get the right knowledge, until you have the relevant information. So one of the things we must come to terms with is the fact that not all relatives of ours will provide a safe space for our children. This is the truth. All right. And a safe space must not only mean they themselves. The relative might be good. All right. You might be right about, the person's values and all of that. But then the environment in which the child will be might not be safe for the child. So those are things that you have to bear in mind. But what are the benefits of sending kids away? All right. Now, after having heard everything I've said so far, you might get the sense or might think that I'm saying, holidays are bad. Don't ever send kids away. Of course, they are not all bad, right? Holidays, sending kids away on holidays has its benefits, especially when you do it the right way. It has tremendous benefits that can really, really help your child develop in a wholesome way. And one of the very first benefits of sending kids away when you do it wisely is the fact that it exposes them to different cultures, different environments, different people, which helps build their independence and their ability to adapt. Right now, when a child has had the experience of having to visit different places, it enhances their adaptability skills. All right, so a child who has only known one place, one family, never really had any experience living outside of where they were born and raised, they would struggle a little bit to adapt to new places. And of course, as your child grows up, one of the things you have to do is to prepare them for life as an adult. Helping your child be able to adapt to any environment is a gift. It's a gift that you must strive to give your child. And having your child be able, to visit different environments, spend time around different people is a great way to enhance their independence and their ability to adapt to different people and different places. So that's one of the big advantages of sending kids away on holidays. The second advantage is the fact that, of course, your kids will get to learn from different people, particularly when your kids begin to enter the teenage years, that stage where they are very vulnerable to influences, to peer pressure. You want to have your kids learning from other people, especially people that can have a strong positive influence on them. Maybe their grandparents are a strong positive influence. Maybe you have a sibling whose values align with yours, whose beliefs about parenting aligns with yours. Of course, your child might be able to really benefit from experiencing a different system, a different family system outside of yours, but that has the same values. There might be a way that certain values are emphasized there that could make a greater impression on your child than how it was being emphasized in your home. So yes, it can be a great way to complement what you've been teaching. But mind you, one of the mistakes that parents make is that they instead send their kids to an environment that contradicts what they have been teaching and create a conflict in the child. That's why you see some kids going and coming back with several bad habits and having forgotten or taking you backwards, right? Based on the work that you have done so far. So bonding with relatives. Family bonds are a big part of a child's identity. It's very important that your child grows up with a strong sense of identity. So, just outside of your immediate family, other family members also add to their sense of identity because it helps the child become more familiar with your family tree, with your family as a whole. Your child gets to meet other members of the family that helps really nurture a strong sense of identity. And that's really crucial for helping a child grow up to be someone who is able, to be resilient, who is able to resist, pressure and all of that. So it helps with resilience as well. A strong sense of identity also helps with resilience because for a person to get carried away by systems or by negative influences, when a person has a weak sense of identity, they are easily carried away by these negative influences. But a strong sense of identity helps a child stay grounded in spite of pressures. All right. That's why we see kids who travel abroad and in no time, you cannot even tell that they are from African descent. They just deny everything about where they are coming from. All right, that's a person who has a poor sense of identity. They try so much to identify, completely denying everything about their existence, adopting every part of that new culture, and forgetting where they are coming from. There is a problem with that person's sense of identity. So we see so many children who travel abroad now, and you hear stories of who, oh, the child is now a lesbian, is now a gay, is now trying to change their gender. Have you ever wondered why? Why do these things not happen while the person is here? Usually, it's when they travel over there that they now find themselves getting sucked in by the culture in that way. It's very important that you raise your child with a strong sense of identity, and it has nothing to do with the family name. Well, that's just one tiny part of it. It's just the beginning. Don't say, you are a this. It's all about the systems, the culture, and the traditions in your family that help build that strong sense of identity. Traditions that are based on the right values, that help build a sense of identity, that help teach particular values, that whenever your child goes to some other place, some other country, they are not easily going to forget who they are. And that's going to help them make decisions that will keep them grounded. All right. So remember that the essence of this session today is not just to just frighten you or discourage you from sending your kids away, but it's to help you be able to look at the right things, to ask those questions that you have to ask boldly, that could be the difference between keeping your child safe and exposing your child to danger. So before making the decision, don't just rely on your nostalgic memories. Don't just rely on the fact that they are putting pressure. If I don't send them now, what will they say? And all of that. So there are so many parents, like I said earlier, you cannot be a purposeful parent and at the same time be a people pleaser. You cannot be a cycle breaker and at the same time be a people pleaser. It doesn't work that way because as a cycle breaker, as a purposeful parent, you have to get comfortable with saying no when something does not align with your values, when it doesn't align with what it is that you're trying to teach or how you're trying to raise your children. Purposeful parenting actually helps you be able to approach the situations with more boldness because the more you know, I promise you, right? Knowledge helps you be more bold, even in making decisions that every other person doesn't agree with. But it starts first with you knowing that this is the right way to go. This is my why. So why should you do it this way? Right? When you understand the risks that children, a child today faces when you just send them away on holidays randomly, it causes you to, just after hearing this session today. Now, there are certain questions I've actually, brought up, or certain points you must have heard me share that have actually got you thinking a lot deeper. That's the first step. That's why knowledge is important. Because in the prior state of ignorance, there's something you would just do it just based on the fact that some relative asked to see the kids, or just based on the fact that you remember enjoying your time going away. Can you imagine? That's very superficial. And then you bundle your 2-year-old and you send away. Some even have them traveling across, very far away, you know, and it's so scary some of the things that we do when we really don't know um what we should have been considering before making those decisions. It's scary. Really, it's scary. It's scary. Now, is the environment safe? Is it structured? Is it aligned with your values? Where you're sending your child to? What are the, maybe you have spiritual values. Maybe you come from a home where prayers and studies of the word is very crucial. It's not something that you take lightly at all. But you're sending your child to an environment where there is no emphasis on these things at all, and you're sending your child away for as much as 2 months. It takes just about 21 days to break or build a new habit. That's why many kids go on these holidays and they come back with with habits that will give you headache. All right, because you move them from your structured environment and you send them to a place where maybe there was not much structure, there was no much supervision, no emphasis on do this or do that and all of that. So, how can you stay involved and ensure your child's well being during their time away? That's another pertinent question you have to ask. Now, I'm going to share this story with you. All right. It's the same story. I think I mentioned it earlier about the lady whose 4 daughters were almost abused. She sent them away on holidays by themselves. The youngest was 2 at the time. And I think after that was the 5-year-old. I think there was a 7-year-old. And then there was I think, 9-year-old at the time. So 4 girls, she sent them away to a relative very far from where she lives. So she lives in Bafusam. She lives in Douala. She sent these kids away to Bafusam for the holidays. And I remember the day she came to my office panicking because she was afraid that her daughters had been abused. All right, and she wanted me to check them at the clinic where I worked at the time. But what really struck me about this story was the fact that when these kids went away on holidays, one of the things that their aunties did was to cut off communication between the children and their mother until the time they had to stay there was over. And guess what? When these girls were harassed, were almost abused sexually night after night, there were attempts made, to abuse them. They kept on trying to speak up, but the aunties kept on hushing them. Not as if the aunties were aware of what was happening, but the aunties were like, "Oh, if you start calling now soon, you start saying you want to go back, you have to try to stay here till the 1 month is up." So it's almost like the caregiver now feels as though if the child is eager to go back, it means I'm doing a bad job. It means you'll tell your mom that I'm not treating you well or that you don't enjoy it here. Next time they won't send you. So this is actually an issue that is very common in our setting. where the child comes over, the child is crying, doesn't want to stay, the parents. So according to them, the solution is to cut off communication. Again, I have another experience of someone who is, I think, what country is that? Should be Canada or something, that wanted to send her 3-year-old to Cameroon. That's very far away for a 3-year-old. And the plan was to leave this child here and go back for 3 months. This child has never lived here before. This child is not familiar with the family member she's coming to keep the child with. And I was like, how do we come off making some of these decisions? We don't realize just how important emotional security. Do you know what 3 months would mean for a 3-year-old who does not really understand what you're saying? And then suddenly you come, drop them off, and you take off. I think I had heard of a story of a child, I think in the UK, who sued their parents for shipping them off to boarding school in I think in Cameroon, or I don't know what country that was. I think Cameroon and Nigeria. The parents traveled from the UK, I think, brought the child without the child's information. They didn't tell the child that that's what was going to happen. So they just, came with the child as though they were coming on holidays, left the child here, enrolled the child in boarding school, took the child to school, dropped the child there, and then went away. And I think this child sued them. Right? I'm sure we are like, oh, how can a child sue their parents? But that was abuse. Sending a child to boarding school without preparation is abuse. Take it anyhow you want. It's abuse because you have no idea just how cruel, just how, ruthless the boarding school environment can be to a child who lacks the necessary skills to thrive. You have no idea how much of a nightmare it is. A child that can't care for themselves, they're going to be the dirtiest always. They're always going to be in trouble. That is abuse. So yes, I actually, so we are getting into times where, particularly for those in the Western world, kids are, they are more powerful than we have ever been, in our own childhood growing up. And it's actually going to put parents in a position where they're actually going to learn. There are so many Cameroonian parents who have left here, gone, over there, and now realize that they don't know how to discipline because the only thing they knew how to do was to shout and beat. Now you're suddenly in an environment where you're not allowed to hit children. And I have so many people, over there who are reaching out to say, oh my God, my kids are actually going wayward because I don't know how to correct them. So most of them think that the solution to that problem is to ship the child back over here as punishment for their bad behavior and then leave the child here to go to school. That is not a discipline strategy. It's not. You can actually learn. That parent-child bond is so important. This is an issue that we're not even talking about enough because the trauma that can come out of that experience of separating your child away from you in that manner, as punishment, according to you, or helping them to behave better and sending them to a place where with a relative that they don't know, they have not really lived with in an environment that they're not used to, just so suddenly without preparing them for that transition, it's going to create trauma for that child. It's going to create trauma. So that's not a discipline strategy at all. That's not. All right. So you have to ensure that if you're sending your kids away on holidays, you can at least stay involved. You can at least stay involved. I'm not saying, if you make the choice to send them away, don't hover, but at least be involved. Like in the case of those 4 girls, they knew that because they had tried to tell their aunts that this boy came to my bed in the night and was trying to hold me. That's what the kids were telling their auntie. And the auntie, was like, I'm sure he was just playing now and stuff like that. So the auntie just brushed it off. And the girls brought it up several times and the auntie eventually shut them up, just said, no, maybe you're, just like trivialized it. And the girls were really scared. They wanted to call their mom and they could not call their mom until the time when their mom finally, the thing was over, the mom came to pick them up. And it's only when they brought them back to their home that they were able to open up, say, Mama, this is what happened. So I'm like, imagine that those girls had been abused, right? Maybe they were actually fully abused, for the full 1 month. Can you imagine having your kids, living day after day of abuse and you not having an idea? Another example that we have very common in our setting are kids who go over to relatives. We'll see, I think there was a scandal like this at one time where some auntie received holiday makers and used to beat them to the point of leaving wounds on their bodies. One of them actually got very sick and almost died. Imagine that. So these are not things that of course, I'm sure there's no parent that wants this for their child. And the next thing you need to ask yourself is, does my child feel emotionally ready? We are living in a society that is in complete oblivion of the fact that emotions are so important. That's why many parents don't care. That's why you see those parents who, took their child from the UK and came and put the child in boarding school here in Africa and just left without any preparation, without, preparing the child for that transition. Is because we are coming from a culture that is completely oblivious of emotional intelligence. We don't think it's a thing. We just, emotions are something to be ignored, to be dismissed, to be trivialized. So we don't really give it much thought. So these parents, of course, did not even consider the emotional impact of their decision on that child. Taking a child from their safe haven, from the one place they have known as home, where they have their security, sending them over, flying them thousands of kilometers to a different country, dropping them off there and coming back home, leaving your child there. You don't consider how will that emotionally impact the child. There's certain kids who tell you, Mama, I don't want to go on holidays. And then now you start forcing them. You must go. Everybody always goes. You must go. That's a child who's not emotionally ready. All right, that's a child who's not emotionally ready. But in many of our homes, because it's tradition, we now start applying force. Everybody always goes. You must go. And then you carry the child there and drop the child off. The child is clearly distressed about it. But because we don't have regard for emotions, we don't realize that that can create an emotional wound. It can be the beginning of other problems to come. We are just blinded by tradition, just blinded by our own agenda. All right. So, does your child feel emotionally ready for an extended stay away from family? And sometimes your children might be the one putting the pressure to want to go. That's why I fervently teach parents on how to create a memorable holiday season for their family. Because I promise you, for those who are coming on board the Purposeful Parenting Holiday Blueprint course, your kids will not want to go anywhere after they experience what it's like organizing a purposeful holiday season. Every parent who's taken this course, the feedback is the same. My kids, they so enjoyed it. They don't want to go anywhere. They just want to be home. They're always asking me what's the next thing to do because it's possible, right? If your kids are constantly looking outwards, constantly wanting to go here, to go there, for long, there's some kids who just want to just, as soon as school closes, they just want to go to grandma's place for the next 3 months. Sometimes, particularly for teenagers, they might be chasing the liberties. They might be chasing the permissive nature of that environment. There might be some structure in your home that is actually good for them, right? Some boundary. And they know that if they go here, they are going to be able to go around that boundary. That boundary doesn't even exist in that place. So you see that if you base this decision just off what your kids are telling you, you might also be misled. You might also make some grave mistakes. Particularly for kids who, have, of course, children sometimes, there are certain decisions that parents make that the kids are not in favor of. The kids don't like it. They don't have to like every decision you're making. That's why you're the parent. So when they realize that in this other person's home, this boundary does not exist. That's why I said, before you send your child over, you need to understand what are the rules here. One of the things you should ask is, how do you manage screen time in this home? Because I cannot tell you how many parents have reached out to me with kids who went on holidays and came back having watched porn. How are screens managed in your home? Maybe you're sending your child over to their cousin's place who has a phone with internet and it's a teenager, 13. And you have a teenager, you're sending your teenager over. Your teenager doesn't have a phone. You've had a system in place that really keeps these things under control. And suddenly you're sending your child to a place where the kids can be up at 10 watching TV with a remote control, flipping through channels, and it's okay. There's nobody who's going to say, hey, you shouldn't be up at this time or you shouldn't be watching that channel. All right. Sometimes the things that we get to see, as a parenting coach, you can't understand what is driving, the weight of my message. It's because of the things I've seen and heard. Some of the things that I can't really share here, but trust me, some of these stories would make you to really sit down and ask yourself, is it necessary? That's why you can't allow your convenience to influence your decision making during this period because you're going to find out that Not only will you be giving your kids the screen to just spend all their time on, but you might just be eager to find somebody to just take your kids on the holidays. Instead of figuring out how can I zoom in on my parenting during this period? How can I teach these skills? How can I get closer to my kids? How can I get to know them more? Build a closer and more secure relationship. Those should be the goals on the mind of a purposeful parent during this season. Right? So at the end of the day, a holiday experience should benefit your child, not just fulfill a tradition or satisfy a family request. Let me take it again. At the end of the day, if all you've grasped from this session today is that a holiday experience for your children should benefit the child first, not your convenience, not tradition, and not about satisfying family requests. You can say no. You can. Especially, it's very important that this is where co-parenting now comes to life. This is where, raising your child with someone with whom you are on the same page becomes crucial. Because most of the parents who know all of these things and still find themselves cornered is because they find themselves married to someone who is not purposeful in their approach, who is just about the tradition. They must go to my mother. They must go to this. They must, and if not, it's a problem in the marriage. And then you find yourself having to make a compromise. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. So, what if you find yourself in a situation where you absolutely have to send the kids away because of, maybe marital issues, because of, a co-parent that is not on the same, plane with you, is antagonizing you or insists that this is how it has to be done, right? Here are the things that you want to consider before sending your kids away on holidays. Firstly, the child's age and maturity level. Kids in the foundational years are very impressionable, 6 years and below, very impressionable. The younger, the younger the child is, the more you want to move away completely from even sending them away on holidays. A child who cannot express themselves, a child who cannot understand what is being said to them. Imagine a child who is 3, who is still trying to find the words for just regular communication. Imagine that something happens to that child. How does that child begin to tell you somebody touched me the wrong way? You see? So this lady whom I talked about, whose 4 daughters were almost abused, the reason why we could even be able to find out that that's what happened, because the auntie to whom these kids were sent will not allow them to even express that this is what happened. What if these kids were in an environment were at an age where they could not even say this is what the person did? The kids did not even have the words. They did, but the way they described it would make you understand that this was abuse. But they did not understand, they just knew it felt wrong, right? But they could not really use the technical words for what was being done to them. They couldn't really use the technical words. So the child's age and maturity level is very crucial to this particular decision. Not all kids handle separation the same way. So just because you have 3 kids, 2 of them are very excited to go on holidays and one of them doesn't want, suddenly the one who doesn't want to go is the problem. You don't always expect your kids to always be the same. All right? Every child has the right to have a completely different opinion about something that every other person sees in another way. And that's okay. It doesn't make them abnormal. It just makes them expressive. So not all kids handle separation the same way. There could be one of your kids who is not going to do well when you send them away on holidays. All right. Now, there could be separation anxiety, a child who cannot express themselves. Please, you either accompany that child or you refrain from sending them away, because they will not even be able to give you an account of what happened to them while they were away. And that's very important. There's nothing worse than having been traumatized or abused and not being able to even put it into words. That's why, one of the experiences I've had was a child who was sent away on holidays, I think before age 2. This child was a very happy, giddy child before going on holidays, came back and was just completely different, constantly crying, constantly irritable. Imagine, because remember, these kids use only their behavior to communicate unease, to communicate something that has happened to them. They don't have the words. So the parent was like, why is this child behaving like this? Is my child possessed? That's always what we end up thinking. When a child behaves in a way that we don't understand, we just call up demonic possession. Later on, it was discovered that that child was abused. The child was abused. So there are some things that Why are you sending a child who is not even up to 2 years away on holidays without any familiar adults that you can trust, or that you who knows this child, who has worked with the child? You're sending your child away, in the name of, I'm sending to my relative, I'm sending to my sister, even if it's your blood sister or blood brother. Remember what I said at the beginning. The fact that you're sending to the person you know doesn't mean they will be the only one involved in caring for that child. You trust the person you know, but you do not know the other people involved. You don't know them. So again, there are too many gaps. So older kids may seem independent as well, but peer influences and household differences. Remember, I gave the example of, you're sending your child to their cousin's home. That cousin in that home has unlimited access to TV, has a phone of their own, is on social media. So maybe all the things you've been protecting your child from, helping your child to learn how to manage, the child now goes to an environment where there is no restriction on any of those things, and they have access to whatever it is that their cousin introduces them to. Some children are going to have their first experience watching pornography this holiday period, and it might be at the home of the relative to which you send them to. It might even be in your own home if you don't have much control over screens, particularly for the teenagers. Lack of structured supervision that could lead to harmful habits. All right. So consider the child's age and maturity level is very important. Now, one of the things that I firmly believe in. Now, nobody will allow you walk on a cemented floor that is still wet. What do they do? One of the ways you can know that the floor is wet, like the cement is still wet, is that you see embankments that have been raised around it. That tells you that this particular portion of the floor is still wet. If you step on it, you will leave an imprint. Let's take that now to raising children. All right. There's an age group, an age range called the foundational years, during which kids are like wet cement. There are some experiences that will shape them for the rest of their lives. All right. That once those imprints are made, it's going to be hard to shake it off. So you want to move away from, allow your kids. Again, I look back at what my dad did. It now makes sense to me. I never understood. I never even saw it as a thing. When we were young, we never ever went on holidays by ourselves. We're always with our mom. While my dad went to work, my mom traveled with us. Well, as we grew bigger, that's the only time I now remember that we're now allowed to travel. Maybe the driver comes pick us up, or maybe we, board the bus with an elder person. They leave us off at the place where we're spending holidays, and then we come, and then whoever brought us there goes back. It's only when we were teenagers that we had that experience. But before then, which I believe were the impressionable years, those foundational years, those crucial, fragile period, my dad stood his ground. They're not going anywhere. He kept us close. He kept us really close. So peer influence, if you have a teenager, you have to check what will be the kind of influence that being in this place. So just look at the kids of the person to whom you are sending your children to and ask yourself, right? Is that how you want your kids to turn out? If the answer is no, please don't allow pressure to pressure you into doing something that will be costly for you in the long run. So just ask yourself, the way this person is raising their children, is that how I want my kids to turn out? Now, one of the things I experienced along with this, that I have so many people who are asking me, oh, can my kids come over for holidays? And my husband and I, we are still in that season where we not only do we not send our kids away on holidays, but we are not yet accepting holiday makers. Not yet. Not yet, because our kids are still in the stage where, they are still very impressionable, and they are in it. We have 4. So that's already a lot. So having 4 more, that makes 8. It's a responsibility that I do not take lightly. So until we are ready, our kids are ready to have that kind of exposure, then we can begin to talk about that. But until then, it's no. Like I said, people who are usually casual about their parenting are always the first to look out for where they can send their children to so that they can rest. They're always looking for more time to rest. But when you look at their parenting, you still see that there have been a lot of gaps. They've not been doing very much. They're always the ones looking for where to send, their kids who have, all the free time and access and have just, anyhow parenting. They're looking for where to send them to. So don't allow anyone pressure you into deciding something that will cost you a lot later. So consider this, all right? Is my child mature enough? Is my child, how well does your child do, with functioning within your system? Is your child one who is internalizing your values? Your child getting to an age where they're able to make decisions, right? How is their sense of identity? How well are they able to stand their ground? What are their beliefs? Are they able to, speak up for themselves? Are they able to, speak up their own ideas, right? Or are they just easily impressionable? Those are things you must ask yourself. All right. So don't be quick. Don't jump into this. Will this experience complement or undo my parenting? You must consider that. Will this experience complement or undo my parenting? It still goes back to the question I asked earlier. Ask yourself, the kids of that home, what is there? What aspect? What is there for me to admire? One of the things some parents tell me now is, since they started taking these courses, okay, and their home is structured, the family members are seeing, instead of them coming to learn, many of them are eager to send their kids to their home. That's why I said earlier that those who are casual about their parenting, who keep saying there's no need to learn, they're the ones who are rushing to send their children into the homes of those who are doing the work because they are seeing the results. They don't want to learn it for themselves. They just want to be eager to outsource. We're in a generation where parents are eager to just outsource it, just give it out. I beg, help me parent them. One of the greatest requests I get in the holiday season is parents asking me, aren't you going to create a camp for children? You should be teaching children, not parents. Create a camp so we can send our kids so that you can teach them. All the things that you're saying. They don't want to do the work for themselves. They're looking for someone to do the work for them. Recently, I told someone, the reason why I would keep working with parents is because if you see all these kids camps, coaching kids and all of that, yes, it has its value, it has its place. But if you only coach the children and you still don't educate the parents and equip them with skills, you are actually climbing, a mountain backwards. It's pretty hard. You're climbing it in reverse. It's pretty hard because at some point you find yourself coming back down. Because there are some things that you're going to teach the child, building the child, the parent who is unskilled, who is who does not have the right knowledge, who has not built up themselves. Because parenting is first about you, the parents, about what you know and what you're doing with what you know. So if no matter the kind of training your child is taking, if you are still toxic, if you're still the kind of parent that does not create room for the child to make mistakes, to fail safely, you're still going to create an environment that is not safe. And what that child, you're going to water down whatever it is the child is learning. So it's much harder. So yes, kids coaching, kid coaches, of course, they do great work, but it must be complemented as well with the parents learning and developing their own skills as well. So it has to be complementary. It has to be complementary. So if you're sending your child to a place, you know that this person is not purposeful, this person is not having any strategic approach, mind you, just get ready. All right, just get ready because there are things that they are going to undo your parenting. They're going to undo it. So your home environment shapes your child's values, their habits, discipline. A different household may reinforce or weaken those lessons. That's some of the realities you must be ready to face. It could reinforce or weaken it. What are the rules in the home? What are the exposure levels? All right. What's their discipline style? All right. Do they correct good behavior or do they just advise? Do they understand how to use consequences? Do they understand how to address misbehavior in a way that really influences the child's capacity to make decisions? So consider this as well. Is this environment reinforcing your parenting values or undoing them? Will your child return with stronger character or difficult habits? Will it give you more work or less? I actually had the experience, of a parent who has had the opportunity of taking one of my courses with her sister. And guess what? During the long holidays, they simply had their kids move from one household to the other. And it was so amazing because while both of them were taking the course at the same time, so when the kids moved from one household to the other household where where the sister was also taking the course, the kids just entered the same program. And it was just as if, nothing moved. So it's amazing. That's why I tell parents, build a village around your children. If you come here, listen to me teach, and you just go and shout amen by yourself, you never invite your family, you never share this with your friends, and those are the same people you're hoping to send your children to for holidays, you are doing yourself. What you're doing is simply you're biting your own self in the ass. So it's important that you build a village. It's important that you have people that share your values, share your perspectives, that understand, some of the things, some of the boundaries and why they need to be in place. It's so amazing when you have family members learning together how they create a complementary system. In fact, they create a whole village around their children where the kids can move from one household to another and they meet the same standards, they meet the same boundaries. The parents respond the same way to certain misbehaviors. It's so amazing. That's what we should aim for. If you hear from the 1 year program, they are aware. I constantly encourage them. Not only should you be taking courses with your spouse, but do as much as possible to ensure that your family, your friends, those within your immediate circle are also learning and growing. Mind you, registration into the 1 year program is open. All right, we're going to take off on the in December. The next cohort takes off in December. Trust me, you don't want to miss it because that's where the learning is continuous, the growth is amazing, the results they are not from here. All right. So again, think about supervision. Who's really watching your child? Who will be their primary caregiver in the absence of the family member Are there older cousins? Are there neighbors? Are there other adults influencing your child? All right. How much freedom versus unsupervised time would the child actually have? Are they just going to be wandering about in the neighborhood? What structures are in place? If I had to get someone into my home, when we finally get to the point where we can actually accept holiday makers, all right, before the kids come over, we're going to have a meeting with their parents to let them know what is going to happen what happens in our home. This is how it works. This is what happens. This is what your kids are going to be going through. Same as if I had to send my kids to your home, we have to have such a meeting as well. I would not just pick them up and drop them off at your house and drive off. No way. The holiday experiences my kids have had, have been accompanied by me. When they have to go see certain family members, meet with family, I had to take time off to be with them while they have those experiences. Why? Because they are still too tender to be able to make some of these experiences or have these experiences by themselves. Again, I learned a lot from what my dad did as well. All right. Not saying that family is bad. Of course not. That's not the point. Remember, we're giving the benefits. It's important for kids to build these family bonds, to get to know their family. But at the same time, you want to ensure that at a stage where your child cannot speak up for themselves, at a stage where your child is too vulnerable to defend themselves, just in case, there are certain things, certain levels of care, the emotional security, it's all necessary for your child to be safe. It's all about their safety. Don't compromise on that. All right? Don't compromise on that. Consider potential risks and with safety and exposure. Now, I shared the story here about the child who had an injury while they were away on holidays at the relative's place because the caregiver, the primary caregiver, had to go to work, left them with the nanny. Nanny got distracted, and because the kids were so many, that particular child actually injured themselves really badly. All right. So there are so many other stories like this. Again, at the hospital setting, we usually receive a lot of children, holiday makers as well, who are in different relatives' houses and get into big trouble, get hurt, get injured because there was no one really watching over them. So accidental injuries, exposure to inappropriate conversations as well or content, right? Influence from older kids or adults. Sometimes you hear a parent saying, I'm sending my kids on holidays. You're sending your kids on holidays. Your child is 4. Your child is 6. The house you're sending your child to, the youngest child there is 13. So you're sending your 4-year-old, 6-year-old to a household with far bigger kids. Now, what do you expect? How do you expect that child? What kind of influence do you expect that child to be exposed to? Those kids are far bigger. Their conversations will obviously be at their level, not at the level of a 6-year-old. So you must consider the age of the kids in the home to which you're sending your child to as well. So there are so many things that you need to bear in mind. So what safety measures are in place? Remember, how can you stay involved? It's very important for you to consider that. How can you stay involved? Because it's very important that you stay involved. I'd like to hear from you in the comments. All right. Based on everything I've shared here about what to consider before actually sending your kids away on holidays. If you are still bent on sending your kids on holidays, then let me hear you in the comments. Which one was a light bulb moment for you? All right. And just in case you have kids who are very young and you're working hard to resist the family pressure, I also like to hear from you. Just put the just put the sweating emoji, right? Let me understand that that means that you're under a lot of pressure. So yes, sometimes you might have a lot of pressure from family. You don't know what to do. Remember, you can shorten the stay. Yeah, you can shorten the stay. The shorter the stay, the lesser the influence, the lesser the risk. Shorten the stay, accompany the child, for the time that the child has to be there. When you're sending your child to an environment that does not check these boxes, but then you have no choice because of the family situation, then you want to shorten the stay and you want to accompany the child or have someone you trust accompany them to the place where you're sending them off to. And most importantly, please be prayerful, right? Even after doing everything you can, there is always a part that you cannot see. So be prayerful and ensure that you are, taking it up to God in prayers and ensuring that you do your part as well. So again, it's complementary. So don't pray only and don't try to do all of this only without taking up prayers as well. It has to be both coming together. All right, once again, thank you so much for listening. For those who were able to make it to this point of this session, let me hear you in the comments. See, I made it to the end, and I'll see you again next Thursday. Mind you, during this season, it's the rainy season here in Cameroon, and because of the rains, streaming is pretty challenging, particularly when it's raining. The network is horrible. We usually can't stream while it's raining, so instead of having live sessions, we might have pre-recorded videos uploaded on the channel or even on our Facebook page as well. Take care and I'll see you during the next one. Bye.